This is WD
FM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. We're your hosts, Brie Bertolacini, Marketing Manager.
and Chris Mullen, Marketing Coordinator. Today, on this special episode, we take a closer look at our fifth community access exhibition, Veterans' Voices Painted Realities, featuring original artworks by U.S. military veterans. This exhibition serves as a platform for the American veteran's voice to be heard through their own words and creativity rather than from depictions by non veteran artists. Admission is free for the museum for active and retired military personnel, as well as their spouses and dependents with valid ID. Veterans Voices Painted Realities is included in museum admission, and it's on view in the museum's lower lobby gallery. To accommodate individuals who are unable to visit the exhibition in person, the museum will also be making Veterans Voices Painted Realities available to view online in a virtual gallery on May 31st. A 3D rendering of the exhibition is currently in progress. The debut of the exhibition's virtual space, as well as details on a virtual artist reception, is coming soon.
Before diving in a little deeper, Chris, I just really want to acknowledge that these special outreach exhibitions that we've been doing, this one being our fifth outreach exhibition, they're super special. And I just really love that we're able to connect with different parts of the Bay Area communities through these exhibitions and kind of inspire and see what kind of artwork that they can create through kind of different stories from Walt Disney's life.
That's so true. And they're not always entirely focused on Disney, but they are focused on our community. And they're always included in museum admission, which is the access part of it. And Veterans Voices is really unique in its own way for that access reason, because it's our first community access exhibition that's going to be available virtually, which is really cool.
Yeah, I love that. And for this particular exhibition, Veterans Voices, the inspiration came in part by Walt Disney's service in the Red Cross Ambulance Corps in France during World War I, and from his studio's extensive contributions to the Allies' World War II effort. Veterans Voices will run concurrently with the museum's current special exhibition, the Walt Disney Studios in World War II, which is now currently open in the Diane Disney Miller Exhibition Hall.
To reach artists from the veterans community, the Walt Disney Family Museum partnered with Veterans Alley, a nonprofit mural project in San Francisco's Tenderloin district. Artist, Navy veteran, and founder of Veterans Alley, Amos Gregory, led this art-making initiative with a peer-to-peer approach. Let's hear from exhibition co-curator Antonia Dapena-Tretter about how this exhibition was developed.
I want to first touch on the fact that this exhibition is with veterans, so we'll talk about why we chose that audience. But then I want to talk about the genesis of the community access art exhibitions in and of themselves, because I think that's important to look at as well. So first, veterans. And I think that the short answer is just that Walt was incredibly patriotic. We know this. Anyone who's been to the museum knows this, that he wanted to be a part of World War I, that he forged his paperwork to get over there to France, ended up driving an ambulance, but would have seen the blood and the effects of war, would have felt what it was like to be on the front lines while himself not a veteran. And so I think that we honor that in Walt when we look at veterans as an audience to highlight at the museum. This was in the back of our minds when we started thinking about the exhibit. But why were we thinking about community exhibits in the first place? And I think that really boils down to our founder, Diane Disney Miller. And we talk loosely about her interest in engaging with the community. But really, there was this one thing that I think started the process of these exhibits and these prolonged community engagements. And that was the decision that Diane made to purchase these a series of Mickey Mouse drawings made by artists with disabilities at an amazing organization called Creative Growth. They're based in Oakland, but the couple that founded Creative Growth, that's Elias and Florence Katz, they also founded two other organizations that do the same thing, same mission, artists with disabilities. And I'll come back to that later. But first, by choosing to purchase these artworks, there were some lines that started to become blurred for our collection. By bringing those in, it was no longer a collection that was exclusively artists who were, let's say, sanctioned by the Disney studios. And when I think about the Walt Disney Family Museum collection, I also think about arts access in a different way than I might with a fine arts collection at any museum you might think of. I used to work at one called the Krieger Museum in Washington, D.C. And so when I made the pivot from the Krieger Museum to the Walt Disney Family Museum, in my mind, I was going from Picasso to Pinocchio. And what was really exciting about that was the fact that suddenly the art didn't feel snooty. And I love abstraction and I love art history. I have my master's in it, but for a lot of people, they feel alienated by that subject matter. And so when you look at an animated cartoon, it takes exactly the same amount of draftsmanship and skill, but it's being used to make a cartoon. And so people feel at ease. They think, oh, I watched that movie growing up. So suddenly there's an easy entry into that subject matter. So I think that the museum is really grounded on a place of arts access in the first place. But when you then return to those Mickey Mouse drawings and you say, okay, now not only though do we have this art that might be more accessible, but is still created by professional artists in a professional setting. And then we have these artists who are working in a more community-based art center and in a form that at that point in history, and even still today, is considered by many to be outsider art. So there's this dichotomy between high and low, between insider artists and outsider artists. And that dichotomy falls apart when those pieces join the collection. And so suddenly, anybody can become an artist, anybody who makes art. And so we look at art in a different way. And I think that when we do an exhibit with community-based artists or people who are making art who might not even identify as such, we are working in that interesting gray space. And that's continuing that choice that Diane made that I think is really, really an important part of where the museum is right now. And that is that when we do these community engagement projects, and they really are full-fledged projects before they become an exhibit, we need to make sure that we understand the demographics of the community that we're working with. And the museum is not going to be an expert in all of these things. It might be an expert in animation and storytelling. It might be an expert in how we use arts to express ourselves. But do we really understand each of these subsections of our community to the level that we would best serve them? I would say the answer is no. So let me just say that the first exhibit we did was with artists with disabilities, because again, it was inspired by those Mickey Mouse images. And we actually worked with an organization called NIAD, Nurturing Independence Through Artistic Development, who was started by that same couple, Elias and Florence Katz. So that was a natural, right? Suddenly we were just like, well, we're just taking these images from our collection and we're building on that. Well, the next exhibit we did, we were working with seniors who had many of them memory disorders, Alzheimer's disease, dementia. That's a very specific set of individuals. And I felt like I was working with those individuals, and I felt like I really needed the expertise of these partner organizations when I was doing that. So this is when we really started taking these organizations and thinking of them not just as a place where the artists happen to be working, but a real partner in all content creation. After that, we worked with youths who were in the juvenile justice system. We also worked with young people who were experiencing homelessness. So, you know, homelessness is a huge crisis here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And again, we are not experts in that field. So we found partners in all of these instances who could help us with that. So when we were looking at veterans as our next audience or community who would participate in this exhibit, we needed to make sure that it was peer-to-peer led. I don't want to pretend that I know what it is to be a veteran. I feel a connection to the audience. My maternal grandfather was a Marine. My father was in the Navy. So I am definitely passionate about veterans, but I myself, I don't know. And so finding Veterans Alley was an important first step because it was through Veterans Alley and the founder, who is himself, he's a Navy veteran, he's an artist, his name is Amos Gregory. Amos was able to add some authenticity to those connections with veterans by being that veteran who could, again, offer that peer-to-peer support. And I was able to then represent the museum, but also offer administrative and curatorial support with my co-curator, Marina VR Delgado, who is just amazing and is very busy working on the virtual show, probably as we speak. And so I think with Amos, I was able to build a network of veterans that I wouldn't have even recognized existed. I have to say that before this experience, I was ignorant to the fact that there are veterans that have served in the United States and been deported to all parts of the world and are not able to remain here in the United States. So Amos, co-founded another partner organization that we worked with called the Deported Veterans Mural Project. And through that organization, we became connected to veterans all around the world. And then our last connection, I'm just highlighting the partners at this point, is the VA Medical Clinic in Eureka. And they allowed us access to rural veterans that we would not have otherwise been able to reach. Because the thing about being a rural veteran is you're absolutely cut off. You're in a remote place and you rely so heavily on your VA medical clinic or hospital. And so having them on board as well as a partner, I think, really helped us to demonstrate the diversity of veterans that we were working with for this special project and exhibit.
As we heard from Antonia, the organization we partnered with was the San Francisco Veterans Mural Project, otherwise known as Veterans Alley. So we'll kind of interchange those names going forward. The project consisted of murals covering over 30,000 square feet of public-facing walls in an alley, where veterans paint their own stories about the true reality of war and the military experience. It was founded in October 2011 by Amos Gregory, United States Navy veteran, and co-founder Gilbert Lovato, a United States Military Corps veteran. Now let's hear from Amos about how this organization was started.
Oh, that's Alley, Veterans Alley. It's our official name is the Veterans Alley Mural Project, and physically it consists of a group of buildings that line a street in San Francisco. The street is officially called Shannon Alley, but the neighborhood has kind of just ad hocly renamed the alley Veterans Alley. And so it's where U.S. military veterans tell their truth and their own story um, in regards to the trauma of the military experience and the trauma of actual war combat experience. The project started off in like 2011, October 2011, at the height of the Occupy movement. So the Occupy movement was not a catalyst for Veterans Alley, but many of the principles of the Occupy movement are embedded in the work of Veterans Alley and in our mission. Um, I have been photographing unhoused vets in the community at night for a year prior to founding Veterans Alley. And I came across one vet who essentially was the first one to really give me his story. Gilbert Lovato identifies as a Mexican American U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He was unhoused at the time. He had been on the streets the longest, like 15 years. And I photographed him the most. And we developed a really deep friendship during that time frame. And then so Gilbert Lovato is his name, but his street name is Gabriel, Archangel of the Bay. So Gabe, walking around with him 3 o'clock in the morning one day, he challenged me to really do something for the Tenderloin and do something for the community. And he challenged me to do something for Shannon Alley, which was referred to as Crack Alley during that time frame. So around, I think that conversation happened in around April 2011, and I went about figuring out how to create a mural project, how to paint murals. And we started the project in October 2011.
And that's such an important part from Amos. Veterans' stories are all too often told by artists who are not themselves veterans. The murals of Veterans Alley are all done by U.S. military veterans, their supporters, and the community at large, representing the first such public dialogue for veterans through murals. The point of the project is to facilitate awareness, understanding, and transformation in our community centered around the universal concept of peace and humanity. Any veteran worldwide can propose and create a mural telling their own stories. Let's hear again from Amos.
Murals are a part of it. So we're a visual arts organization. So we do a lot more than murals, but the expression that is publicly facing is the murals. And the reason being with the murals is because, we've never had this type of opportunity ever out of all the money, all the different organizations, all the different places that were quote unquote providing health and wellness to veterans. No one ever came up with a great idea of having us paint our own truths on the wall. And so most of this artwork that you see in regarding the veteran experience is usually done by people that are not veterans and usually glorifies war and misrepresents our stories. And with the public nature of this, is that we would have the opportunity to be able to put these stories on the wall, leave those stories on the wall, but also, I mean, it, it's a condemnation, but it's also some steps for healing for the overall society because you have to walk past that story every single day as you traverse the Tenderloin district. And we're in a naturally viral location where we're at the intersection of three large neighborhoods. We're at the corner of northwest corner of the Tenderloin. We're a block away from Union Square, which is usually filled with hundreds of thousands of tourists every day. And we're 1 block away from Nob Hill. And so, just by the very nature of the location, the messages are received not only by residents of the Tenderloin, but by people that from all around the world that come and go in San Francisco, and they take these messages with them and they broadcast them for us. And then and this is opportunity where no one is there to tell us to shut up. So everywhere we've gone, and every place we've gone, museums, exhibitions, different collaborations, people have always told us to shut up, right, in some form or fashion. And every single thing that we've done in the alley has been, uncensored, our work. We've come across problems with property owners. We've had people that, really have taken taken Betts Alley and put Betts Alley on the radar, and they just spent time attacking Betts Alley and the messages in Betts Alley, and the fact that Betts Alley is founded by a black and a brown person, and so you find those difficulties that come in within there. But I think that having that space out there on that wall gives us that freedom where we aren't faced with others' short-sightedness and narrow-mindedness, which actually harms us in the end.
Deported veterans represented in this exhibition are associated with the Deported Veterans Mural Project in Tijuana, a Mexico-based organization serving deported veterans from all over the world. Deported Veterans Mural Project was co-founded by Amos Gregory in collaboration with formerly deported veterans Fabian Rebolledo and Hector Barajas. While Rebolledo and Barajas eventually returned home, other veterans remain abroad. Alex Murillo, an artist whose works are included in this exhibition, came to the United States as a child, served in the U.S. military, and was deported after his service for a cannabis offense. According to Murillo, quote, "It is no great secret that U.S. veterans get in trouble after our military service. They do their time, pay their debt to society, and then they get to go home to their families. Why not us? The judge thanked me for my service to my country and then ordered me deported." End quote.
Artworks created by deported veterans for Veterans Voices Painted Realities were shipped from all over the world, including Jamaica and Kenya. Themes explored include trauma, citizenship, race, parenthood, homelessness, isolation, and healing. Exhibition co-curator Antonia Dapena-Tretter notes, quote, "These artworks are powerful, personal, and as diverse as the veterans who made them. By sharing their art with the public in this group show, these talented artists are contributing to a greater awareness of the realities of conflict and the lifelong process of healing post-service." End quote. The museum provided art-making materials, additional studio space, shipping expenses, and ongoing curatorial support from exhibition co-curator Marina Villar Delgado, who's been on this podcast several times, to make the outreach project possible. Here's what Antonia had to say about this experience.
The project started about 2 years ago, and at that point, we knew of no COVID. We planned for no COVID. We knew of no COVID, and then very much smack dab in the middle of the project. So at this point, we have vision statements written. We feel like we've got a defined scope. We have our partners. We know which artists are participating in each of these 3 demographics that we've touched on. But then everything gets shaken up because when we partnered with Veterans Alley, their sweet spot in terms of art making is mural collaborations. If you haven't been and you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, you should go to the Tenderloin sometime and walk down that alley and see the murals that are in that space made by veterans, most of them local. So we had been thinking up to this point that we were going to do murals, that we were going to do a mural with our remote rural veterans and through the hospital, that we were going to do a mural with a number of the deported veterans in Mexico, that we were going to do a San Francisco-based mural with the artists and veterans who are being served by Vets Alley. And they are thinking of it now. It's worth pointing out that demographic is the artists in the show are exclusively people of color as well. So all of these people we were going to encourage to work together in these shared visions on large scale canvases. Well, suddenly we're talking about social distancing, and we absolutely cannot have people working together on a giant shared canvas in an enclosed space. And then we started thinking, well, can we do outdoor murals? I mean, yes and no, because you've got the potential for weather becoming an issue, and we want to make sure the art is preserved for the exhibit. So we realized that we were going to need to start sending supplies to every single participating artist worldwide instead of strictly to one local spot for those artists to convene. And in fact, I should point out that at this point, we had already rented a studio in Tijuana for the artists to come together to make sure they could create artwork together in a space that was shielded from the elements. And so what ended up happening is we had already shipped this giant roll of canvas to this studio in Mexico. And I had to ask my main contact on the ground there. His name is Alex Murillo, and he is featured in the exhibit. I had to say, Alex, I'm going to need you to get some scissors out and get to cutting. So they cut up this giant roll of canvas in order to distribute smaller canvases, which are still not small. They're like, most of them are about 3 feet tall, but distribute the smaller canvases to each of the participating artists there. And then, also to piggyback on the idea of these challenges we had to overcome, mailing art supplies, you would think we're also used to Amazon. You're like, oh, just order it up and send it out. Well, I'll tell you what, shipping internationally has its hurdles depending on the country. So shipping to Jamaica, talk to the education team. it was a nightmare because of customs issues. They needed to know the chemical composition of the paints to make sure that it could come into Jamaica. Anyway, it took months just to get them their paint. And then there were issues shipping artwork back from some of these places, dealing with FedEx in Mumbai, Kenya, when they're so many hours ahead. I just wasn't comfortable asking wonderful William in facilities to be up at 10 p.m. at night in order to speak to somebody in the morning in Mumbai. So what that meant is that I had to be up at 10 at night communicating with the FedEx in Mumbai to try to work out some issues we had with some numbers. It's a long story, but the point is it all came together, and it just took a lot more communication, a lot of Zooms, a lot of Facebook Messenger videos, which is something I really knew nothing about until we got involved with this. But a lot of people around the world might not have Zoom access and could and did seem to have Facebook. So what can I say? Oh, and one more little story. The other hurdle we had with shipping is that we were working with a veteran who happens to be unhoused here in the Bay Area. His name is Preston, and Preston used to be a chaplain and now lives in an encampment in Oakland. And you cannot mail anything to someone who lives in an encampment. So we had to figure out what we were going to do. So I was mailing supplies to Amos, who was driving to the encampment to deliver the art supplies to Preston, and found his tent. But again, there were some struggles to make all this work in order to get in touch with Preston. But it's amazing because we sent Preston canvas and paints just like everybody else. But for Preston, for him to be true to himself, he wanted to paint a shopping cart, which was a real expression of his lifestyle being much more transient than yours and mine.
This exhibition had so many challenges surrounding the museum's closure, as well as the world's response to COVID-19. So it is incredible that we're able to see this exhibition today in person, as well as virtual. And the premise of the exhibition was difficult enough to pull off before a global pandemic hit. So here's Amos Gregory on his experience working with artists to get their artwork back to exhibit.
Well, it was difficult, difficult, but then also easy because, the past year I was supposed to be on the road a lot. And, being on the road is kind of interesting and cool for a couple of days, but it's a lot of work when you're integrating yourself into like a community and trying to, extract or, bring out stories and actually create a tangible object with the community. It's very difficult. It's very tiring. But the folks that I've been working with in these three different communities with deported veterans, with African American veterans, with rural veterans, I already had a multi-year relationship with these communities, and so it was just a matter of shifting and shifting on the fly, and I got people that are living in Mexico and people that are living in Nairobi, Kenya, that barely have access to the internet, and don't have like Zoom or the different types of applications or even the hardware to be able to jump online and then really communicate. And so we used everything, right? We were Facebook Messenger, we were Skype, we did some Zooms. And so it was just really catering to each individual's need, but then focusing on the some of the basic skills, right? And because when I'm doing that, I'm in person, I'm with people, and I'm in the community, it's easier for me to sit down and show someone how to sketch, or show someone how to fade, and some paints and some colors. And so that was it's challenging. We facilitated that, and it was really interesting also to be able to go more, I think, into each individual's home, right? Each individual home environment. We had some people that were kind of in a congregate, setting. We had one vet that was living out in the tent for most of the time that he was doing his artwork. Then, we had another vet who had a full garage, or studio, and to be able to sit down with folks in those intimate environments and get to know them more, and also develop a lot more trust between from them to me. So that was good. And the communities that I work with are, they're marginalized communities, right? I only do work with Black, brown, and poor white people, and that's reflected in the folks that I am that are in this art exhibition. We're looking at, you know, the access to just basic care for rural veterans, right? And I've done a lot of work up in Orleans, California, the tribe called the Karuk tribe, and veterans within that tribe, and then just looking at the different barriers that they have to be able to access quality health care and wellness services. Then you look at Black veterans, right? And you look at the percentage of unhoused veterans that are Black is 40%. So it's like, we don't make up 40% of our society, and the disparities that have existed with Black veterans in our country, and in particular Black women veterans. And so these are the types of folks that I do my artwork with. Um, when I say do the artwork with, I mean I focus in those communities, right? These stories, those overall communities have to be told. But in Vets Alley, we've had people that are millionaires, that are vets, that have come in and have painted, right? And so this thing that was created with me and this unhoused vet, who's actually people would consider the least amongst us, right? The most vulnerable amongst us. Everyone, including those millionaire vets or those established veterans and their careers and their lives, everyone has to give homage to this person for their courage and being the first one to give me their story, but also having the courage to create a project which they knew would benefit many people.
And the stories don't just end with the pictures on the wall. Accompanying the virtual exhibition is the Desolate Zine, assembled by Amos Gregory and Jenny Martinez Medina, that goes into further detail about the individual artists featured. Let's hear from Amos about putting the zine together and about his own contribution that's featured in the exhibition.
Well, putting that zine together was interesting because you're dealing with like so many different groups of people, but then the individual folks, and then some of these folks I've worked with for quite a few years, right? And so to finally sit down and have them, talk to me, and we had some wonderful help from some volunteers also, different organizations, right? And then Antonia also from the Disney Museum. She was very instrumental in making all of this a success. But to actually have them sit down and do the interviews, and really piece it together in 5 minutes, right? One person, Rudy Richardson, right? Rudy Richardson, he's a deported veteran. He lives in the UK, and his father was a GI, it was African American GI. But there's this weird thing that happened with black GIs and German women and their children at the end of World War II during the occupation, and how soldiers were reassigned. They weren't encouraged to claim parentage of their children. The army actually frowned upon it, and they would try to strip them, get them away. Right? They would send them to Korea, and so to be able to listen to Rudy put that all together, because in a sense, Rudy, he has a birthright citizenship. But because of the circumstances around that time, right, and the systemic thing, racism that happened in the army, Rudy is a deported veteran now, and he's in the UK. And to be able to have Rudy put all of those things together, because over the years I've got the piece here and the piece there and the piece there, but for Rudy to sit there and within 3 to 5 minutes put it succinctly together and put this timeline of him being born in the 50s until, you know, a few months ago living in the UK. So that was deep. And then also with our unhoused vet, we have one unhoused vet, Preston. And I think Preston putting together his story and also working with me, you know, compelled him to take my advice and a little guidance, and then, you know, to get himself off of the street during the pandemic and into what they call a stay in place hotel. And so he's been housed for almost, you know, like maybe like 8, 9 months now. That's the longest he's been housed, for about 5 or 6 years, right? And so it's really good to be able to, you know, touch folks in those ways, really get their stories, but then also have an impact to be able to guide someone to, you know, their next step on the path towards healing. No pills, you know, it talks about the over prescription of antipsychotics and pharmaceuticals to veterans, right, to treat the list of ailments that affect us. And it's advocating for the use of medicinal cannabis, which has been proven to help alleviate many of the symptoms of some of the problems that we have. And, you know, there's been a lot of documentation over the years of over prescription of meds, right? You know, antipsychotics and then barbiturates, oxycontins, all kinds of stuff to veterans through the Department of Veteran Affairs. And many veterans have been using medicinal cannabis for years to help themselves, but there are still penalties that are associated with cannabis use, and depends on the veteran's status and where they are. If they're in like a rehab program, you know, they could lose access to medications that they actually do need for, like, maybe a spine injury, or they, you know, could have lost housing that was that was a, you know, part of a package, a rehabilitation package, because of the use of cannabis. But then also, when you look at like cannabis and cannabis, offenses, you will find that a lot of our deported veterans were deported because of cannabis offenses. And then so with the blinded by the light was that the headlines that were coming out during the COVID crisis. Well, we're still in the COVID crisis, so especially at the beginning and towards like the summer COVID crisis, the pandemic. You know, I was just seeing these silly, foolish, like church leaders, right? You know, religious leaders. The first ones I saw were in Iran, and when the pandemic first started happening, it was March, April last year, and then there were like thousand, it's like 1,000 plus, you know, worshipers or parishioners and going that stormed a mosque because the mosque was closed, and they just stormed it, and they were all together, no mask, about 2 inches apart, and they went in and they just took it over, right? And then, you know, in New York City, there was almost a near riot between, you know, the Hasidim community and the police over a funeral of a famous rabbi, and 20,000 people were going through the streets of New York, and this is a big, huge, like, proceeding. And, you know, they were defying those laws, right? And then you get the Baptist minister down there in Louisiana and Florida that defied those laws. And then one died from COVID-19. And then so I just saw that. And then, you know, and I just looked at, okay, First Amendment, freedom of religion. Okay, you can practice, you know, you are free to practice your religion, but not to the point to where it actually, your practices would actually cause a decrease in public safety, right? So if you believe in, some people believe in Pentecostals, I guess they are. They believe in, you know, the snake charmers, you know. That's illegal now, right? Why? Because people get bitten by rattlesnakes, right? And then there's some people that they worship some of the older, more religions that are not really mainstream today, but they still are religions. And then those religions call for sacrifices. So it's not like, because I have my religious belief, I can go out and sacrifice someone, right? Or I can like do some snake charming with a 6-year-old. So then why in the heck? Because I got this invisible virus bumping around, what I want to, I say that I can get together, raise my hands up, and then sing praises to God. So I really wanted to hit the hit on that one. And then truth of the matter is about the police killing the black people, black, brown, and poor white people. And then people actually confuse that mural because of the colors, right? As a police officer, right? That's just a police officer, and then the police officer is white because I'm using pictograms, but just add in the face. Cops kill black, brown, and poor white people. It's just not white cops. Trust me. And then if you look at the person that has their hands up, the person's skin tone is brown, right? People say you're black, but black is like the absence of color, is all dark, right? I'm actually a brown person, right? Latino people, brown people, right? Then you see the outline, poor white people, and there's a lot of folks miss the fact that you know poor white people are in the situation where they're surrounded by black and brown people, right? Because they're poor white people, and they also experience the brutality and extremism of white supremacy as expressed through policing today.
I love hearing artists speak about their artwork and what it means to them and the message that they're trying to portray. And I highly recommend visiting our virtual exhibition, checking out the Desolate Scene there, and that's where you can access it. Veterans' Voices can currently be experienced in person at the Walt Disney Family Museum and virtually on May 31st. Before we end this episode, let's hear once more from exhibition co-curator Antonia Dapena-Tretter about what you can expect to see in this exhibition.
It's so hard to pick and choose a particular artwork. I would say your question, what to expect. Amazingly, the virtual exhibit is almost exactly like the real exhibit, except I would say there's nothing like standing in front of a canvas and being able to study it like an inch away from it, right? So go to the museum if you can. But if you can't, if you're like some of our deported veterans around the world and you need that extra bit of access, it's incredible that this virtual exhibit is going to launch sometime soon. Stay tuned. And what you'll see is you're going to find out that there's so much diversity and enrichment in this particular community that we focused on this time, because for veterans, they could be going through any of the things we've already discussed. They could have mental health challenges. They could be going through a period where they are unhoused. Any of the things that we were looking at in some of our other community access exhibitions can surface for these individuals. So I would say that there are a lot of differences amongst the community, but then there's also things that you're going to find in common, of course, as you would with anybody who is a human being living on this earth. So there are paintings that focus on parenthood that a lot of people will relate to. There are paintings that, because they were created during 2020, are references to race protests. There is a painting that is a reference to COVID. It's called Blinded by the Light. It's one of the ones that Amos submitted to the show. And it has a little COVID virus up at the top, and these hands are sort of reaching toward it. And so people, anyone participating in the show, were struggling with the very same things that I think we, as humans, were going through during this incredibly intense year of 2020, and we've rolled right into 2021 with some of these same struggles, although we can see a light at the end of the tunnel. Let's hope we're not blinded by it, to reference Amos's piece again. And I'll mention two more artworks. One is by our deported veteran in Jamaica. He is alive and well. His name is Jeff Brown, and his piece is the largest in the show. I thought he was going to cut his canvas into multiples, but he just went for it. And there are so many smaller pictures throughout the larger canvas that you really do have to zoom in if you're doing it virtually, or get up close and study that canvas top, bottom, left, right when you're there in person. And one more that I'll mention is a reproduction of an artwork in the show, and that's because this particular artist, he is in Nevada, but he is deported. He chose to stick with that mural that we had discussed way back at the beginning of our chat here. He did not want to go smaller, and he painted an entire wall. So what we did is we had that wall photographed in sections and reproduced on that intro panel as you enter the show. It's the first thing you're going to see when you read that didactic text about the exhibit. You'll see his work. His name is Cesar Nunez. And if that name does sound familiar, it's because he was actually featured in an immigration documentary on Netflix.
And finally, let's hear some final words from Amos.
So folks that are interested in coming and meeting us, seeing the artwork, and also participating, you can go to vetsalley.org and just send us, shoot us an email, send us some contact, show us some love, and then we can all go from there. And just remember that it's a whole block. And so when we started off, as like I said, we heal, you heal. We started off as vets and painting in the alley. It's now morphed into, us supporting the overall community, right? We have summer kids camps. Kids come out, paint. Communities painted like humongous words on the street with us. We do rest in peace murals for people in the neighborhood who are really tight with us and our project. So, it's Veterans Alley, Art and Healing for Veterans _ a community project. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time and all the effort everyone has put into this show, and hope we can get more people out there to see it. And it's a very nice, wonderful time working with you guys.
We hope you experience Veterans Voices Painted Realities in person or virtually to see the artworks from our veterans that share their message of the truth, irony, pain, and hope of living as a veteran today. Visit waltdisney.org/Veterans Voices, all one word, to visit the exhibition virtually and to read the desolate zine.
That brings us to the end of this special episode of WDFM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at WDF Museum. Email us comments and questions at podcast@wdfmuseum.org. From both of us, keep moving forward.